The terrifying power of the Ovamians. The universe is vast and wide. It is so incomprehensibly immense that it would take eons to travel from one corner to the next. That is assuming it even has a beginning and an end. Many have speculated that its boundaries are boundless. An infinite reality that exists indefinitely. As a result, many species across the universe have been given the gift of life. All of varying shapes and sizes. Strengths and weaknesses. Morals and customs. Most agreed to live in harmony regardless of technological advancements, appearances, or cultural differences. Most species didn't even believe that there were other planets that could sustain life and thoroughly believed they were the only ones gifted with life. This tale is of one particular species that not only knew about life on other planets, but they also had technology available to them that allowed them to travel from one planet to another. At least in their specific galaxy. However, they were not keen to follow the peaceful trail set by other species. No, they delighted in causing mass death and destruction wherever they went. These evil beings were the Ovamians. Many different planets attempted to fight back against them, but the Ovamians possessed a power so horrifying that no other species could stand up to them. For many centuries they maintained an iron grip on not only their own galaxy, but the surrounding ones as well. Their wickedness and greed knew no bounds. They became known as the Shadow Plague, a threat that could potentially eradicate all other life forms in existence. Eventually, a league was formed from highly advanced planets that banded together in order to eliminate the dreaded Ovamians. Using their combined resources, they created various weaponry to fight back against the tyranny. Many different species fought together for decades until they finally managed to repel the Ovamians back towards their home world. The League initially thought that victory was at hand, but it was there that they learned a very painful lesson. The Ovamians, having been pushed into a corner, pushed their horrible powers to their limit, and with it came the slaughter of the League's main forces. The leaders of each planet realized that this could spell the end for their people, and so they decided to utilize what was to be a last resort weapon. Using a type of extremely rare crystals, they harnessed the powerful energy inside them and built powerful bombs that would be used to destroy not only the Ovamians, but also their home planet. The new bombs, which they named the crystal bombs, were dropped onto the planet before the Ovamians had a chance to counterattack. Despite their incredible powers, the Ovamians were no match for the sea bombs, and thus began the extinction of their evil race. The energy of the bombs was so potent that it vaporized everything in its radius down to the molecular level. The planet itself could not withstand such an assault and exploded mere hours after the bombs were dropped. A black hole formed in place of the core, as if the planet itself was also a dark and twisted entity. With the end of the war came a wave of celebration amongst the surrounding galaxies. They had at long last defeated their dreaded tyrants after centuries of torment. Over the next couple of decades, many of the subjugated species managed to rejuvenate their planets with the help of the League. The League continued to grow as more planets healed and joined their ranks. With the Ovamians defeated, the League's purpose was now to maintain peace and prosperity among all species. Their leaders assumed the universe would never have to see that level of evil again. However, unbeknownst to the League, the seeds of evil managed to slip away from their doom during their planet's final moments. Escaping into the vacuum of space in search of new victims to torment and planets to conquer, vowing to someday get their revenge on the League and its allies. Thousands of light years away from the League's headquarters was the peaceful planet of Bakia. It was home to humans almost identical to that of the distant planet Earth. However, the key difference came in the genetics of the Bakian humans. The common eye color was green or blue and the common hair color was blonde, whereas brown eyes and black or brown hair were considered rare. The planet was also on a similar technological level to that of the Earthlings, although Bakians were not interested in weapons of mass destruction and simply focused on the betterment of their civilizations. That wasn't to say conflicts didn't occur, as there were always disagreements wherever life bloomed. Some would say that most of these conflicts occurred during adolescence. Particularly in high school, Larissa wiped away her tears as she exited the girls' restroom while dozens of students walked by her on their way to the bus section of the high school. They were so incredibly cheerful after learning of the early release day that they barely registered their surroundings and fellow students. It seemed that almost everyone was oblivious to Larissa's emotions as she wandered through the dozens of blonde heads on her way to the front of the school. It was there that her two best friends were waiting patiently for her so that they could take her home. "Larissa? Are you okay?" said a concerned light blonde-haired girl with green eyes. She was wearing a pink skirt with a polka-dotted white and pink blouse along with white flats. "I'm fine. Thank you, Relina." Larissa lied and tried to hide her watery eyes. "Don't lie to us, Larissa," said her other best friend. A brunette with blue eyes wrapped her arms around Larissa to give her a hug. She was wearing navy blue athletic pants with a matching navy blue hoodie as well as white running shoes. "It was Gianna, wasn't it?" Larissa rested her head on Allison's shoulder and nodded. "She told me that Jackson would never date me and that I could never compare to her." Larissa whimpered. "I didn't take her seriously, but when I was leaving my last class, I saw her kissing Jackson by the water fountain." Hey. "It's okay." Relina patted Larissa on the back as Allison continued to hug her. "Jackson doesn't know what he's missing out on. That witch probably got his friends to talk to him. She thinks she can have anybody she wants just because she has brown hair and brown eyes, but she can't hold a candle to you. You are beautiful, intelligent, and have an incredibly bright future ahead of you." Larissa finally smiled and wiped away her remaining tears. "Thanks guys." She pulled away from Allison and adjusted her golden blonde hair until it curled cutely down her sides. Larissa was indeed beautiful and she didn't mind dressing casually as her outfit consisted of dark blue jeans, a pink tank top, and a pair of pink Converses. Her blue eyes now showed a hint of happiness as she realized how lucky she was to have such great friends. All three of the 16-year-old girls were around the same height, although Allison was the slightly taller one. They had all met during elementary school and had remained best friends ever since. "Let's do something this weekend. I'll talk to my mom about it when I get home," Larissa asked with another smile, to which her best friends nodded in agreement. The three girls chatted happily as they drove through the town, making sure to cruise a bit since they had some extra time. About a half hour after leaving the school, Relina finally drove to Larissa's home to drop her off. "Say hi to your mom for us and let us know what she says," Allison yelled as the three girls waved goodbye. "I will." "Thanks girls," Larissa yelled back and continued to wave until the car turned a corner. She then wandered up her driveway while reaching for the house key inside her backpack. After entering her home, she realized it was unusually quiet and her mother was nowhere to be seen. "Mom, I'm home. We had an early release day," she called out as she wandered into the living room. "That's weird. The car's outside and it's too early to be out jogging," she muttered to herself and pulled out her phone. Straight to voicemail. The teen was beginning to get a little worried. She sat down on the couch and began pondering what to do. It didn't seem like anyone had broken in since no windows were broken and the door didn't seem to be damaged. It almost seemed like her mother had just vanished. Then suddenly, a bright purple orb appeared right in front of her. It positioned itself in the middle of the living room and slowly increased in size until it resembled the shape of a full-size body mirror like the ones you see in clothing stores at the mall. Larissa was awestruck at what she was seeing, but nothing could have prepared her for what happened next, her mother casually stepping out of the purple portal as if it were the most normal thing. Her mother, Ulrika, was a tall and gorgeous woman. It was evident where Larissa had gotten her beauty from, although her mother had a lighter shade of blonde hair and also a lighter skin tone than her daughter's tan skin tone. She was wearing a long white sleeve shirt with light blue jeans that were folded slightly above her ankles, but no shoes or sandals on her feet. Ulrika didn't even notice Larissa until she heard her daughter's phone fall onto the floor. "Oh. Hey, sweetie. How long have you been sitting there?" Ulrika asked nervously. Larissa's wide-open mouth and inability to speak was a good enough answer for her mother. Ulrika sighed and sat down next to her daughter. "I didn't want you to find out like this. But I suppose destiny has decided for me. Ulrika then showed her daughter a golden bracelet on her left hand and pressed her thumb onto the base of it. A bright menu appeared in the form of a 3D hologram, and it displayed what appeared to be various solar systems. These are planets from a distant galaxy, and this bracelet is actually a highly advanced transporter that allows me to travel freely from planet to planet. The mass of purple energy that you saw earlier is basically a door. A portal, if you will. Larissa was in a state of shock at everything her mother was telling her. It all seemed like something out of a science fiction movie. But how? Do you work for the government? She asked. Ulrika chuckled and shook her head. No. This device is from a very distant planet. A planet near our original home world. That's right, Larissa. You and I are not Bakians. We are part of an elite race known as Ovamians. Larissa couldn't believe what her mother had just said. I must be dreaming. Yeah. I'll wake up soon and everything will be just like Ow. She yelled as she turned to see that her mother had pinched her arm. This isn't a dream, sweetie. Ulrika said with a grin, you are old enough to know the truth, so sit down and listen up because this is gonna be a long story. As Ulrika sat down next to her daughter, she told her all about the glorious dynasty the Ovamians had created and how it had lasted many centuries. She then informed her of the costly war that turned them into an endangered species, as well as the destruction of their home planet at the hands of an allegiance known as the League. But why, Mom? Why did they hate us so much? Larissa asked. Her shock from earlier had shifted to that of intrigue and amazement. Ulrika smirked and placed her hand on her daughter's shoulder. Because we are superior beings, sweetie. We have the power to conquer worlds and bring every civilization in our way down to their knees. Ulrika said proudly. You see. All Ovamians possess a special ability that steals the life essence from other living beings. We can then manipulate that life essence into two forms. We can either extend our lifespans in regards to the quality of the life energy, or we can grow to the size of titans. Titans? Larissa raised an eyebrow. You mean like giants? And with this life energy? Does that mean we can live forever? Yes, giants. We can grow so incredibly large that our house would be smaller than our toes. Ulrika winked, and yes, if we transfer the life energy into our being, then we can essentially live forever. If someone had another 30 years of life left and I absorbed their energy, then those 30 years would be added to my lifespan. We would just need to rinse and repeat every time we are running low. In fact, you are over 100 years old. What? I'm an old lady. Larissa yelped with shock. No. I don't even remember living that long. I have memories from when I was 5. And that was 11 years ago. Not almost 100 years ago. Ulrika laughed. Calm down, honey. You're basically 16 years old in terms of mindset. I transferred some life energy to you before you were even a toddler, and I manipulated it in a way to keep you as a baby until I found a safe place for us. You see. Right before our home world was bombed, I managed to recover one of the League's high-speed spaceships. When the explosions began, I was one of the few that had any form of escape. I remember holding you in my arms as I witnessed our planet become a black hole. Ulrika sighed. We're an endangered species, Larissa. I estimate no more than 10 Ovamians managed to escape that day. Including you and me. So even if I may technically be over 100 years old, my growth was normal once you found a safe place to raise me. So, I'm still mentally the same age as all my classmates. Larissa nodded, now much calmer. But Mom, stealing life energy, isn't that basically murder? Yes. Ulrika said flatly, but you shouldn't feel bad about it, sweetie. It is our birthright to rule over every other species because we are superior to them. When you step on an ant, do you feel bad about it? Well, no, but that's different. Those are actual insects and not Bakians or other sentient species, Larissa countered. When you grow into a giant and look down at them, they won't look much different. Almost all other species are essentially insects to us. Ulrika smirked. Actually, that's a great idea. Let's go on a trip. I can teach you how to use your powers and we can grow into giants together. It'll be fun. What? No, Mom. I can't just start destroying Bakia. Larissa complained. Relax, sweetie. I don't want to destroy our new home either. The low level of technology on this planet means that this is the perfect hiding spot from those pesky League planets. Ulrika commented before wandering into the restroom to splash some water on her hair. Her green eyes beaming with excitement at the thought of finally being able to rampage with her daughter. Do you want to change into something more comfortable, Larissa? I highly suggest going barefoot. You'll love feeling the little crunches and pops under your bare soles. Larissa hadn't moved from the couch, her mind was still processing everything her mother had disclosed. It all seemed impossible, but Larissa was a very smart girl and she couldn't deny the technological evidence. And if that was real, then everything her mother said must have been the truth. Are you sure this is a good idea? I mean, I don't even know how to use my powers. And what if we get attacked or something? It's a great idea. You don't have to worry about anything, sweetie. I'll teach you how to use them and we won't have to worry about any attacks. In fact, I think you'll have fun playing with the military ants. Hee hee. Ulrika chuckled in the restroom as she continued to get ready. Don't you trust me, Larissa? Of course I do, Mom. Larissa nodded and stood up. It's just a lot to take in. But I suppose I've wanted to have a crazy wild adventure for a while now, so count me in. Larissa said, to which Ulrika cheered loudly. Larissa giggled and wandered into her room to change like her mother suggested. She decided to wear a white long-sleeve shirt just like her mom, although she buttoned hers up near her elbows. Her shoes and socks came off soon after, much to the approval of Ulrika, who was now waiting in the living room. So how many times have you done this, Mom? Larissa asked as she watched her mom fiddle with the holographic menu on her golden bracelet. Thousands of times, sweetie. I was known as a collector back on our home world, so I got to treat myself as many times as I wanted. But if you mean how many times have I done this since we arrived on this planet? Around 200 times or so. Ulrika explained right before a bright purple orb shot out of the golden bracelet and increased in size until it resembled the familiar portal that Larissa had seen earlier. Ready? Ulrika asked her daughter, who seemed to be staring at the purple mass of energy. Larissa reached over to grab her mother's hand and then smiled. Ready? She nodded and then the two stepped through the portal together. The portal was truly like a door. In the blink of an eye, the cozy living room disappeared and it was replaced by a meadow of blue flowers. Groves of large trees were scattered around the bright meadow and it was evident that this planet was teeming with life. Mom, where are we? Larissa asked as she began walking through the meadow, enjoying the blue flowers. We're about 1538 light years from Bakia. This world is a few decades behind the technology you're used to, so just think of it as the 1990s. I'm not quite sure what this planet is called, but it's inconsequential information. The beings on this planet are very similar to Bakians, although their ears are larger and quite pointy, which is supposed to help them hear much better. I suppose they'll be able to hear our booming steps better than most. Ulrika then turned off the planet information tab on her bracelet and began to stretch. Oh wow. They're kinda like elves then. That's really cool. Larissa said with excitement. Hardly. There are hundreds of beings with their exact body structure scattered across many different worlds, so they're not exactly rare. You'll understand that soon enough. Ulrika said before concentrating on the banks of life essence inside of her, manipulating them like Play-Doh. Her Ovamian body reacted accordingly and began to enlarge at an alarming rate. Her bare feet began sinking into the green meadow as her height increased. After a few moments, the once tall trees around the meadow now barely reached her ankles. That bracelet really is something, Mom. It can transport you across galaxies so easily and has vast knowledge of the beings living on any planet you visit, Larissa complimented. oblivious to her mother's growth since she was examining the blue flowers. "Did you bring that back from our home? PP planet?" Larissa stuttered as she finally turned around. Her mouth dropped as she found herself looking at her mother's now enormous bare feet. Ulrika giggled and wiggled her toes, causing Larissa to lose her balance as the massive flesh bounders pounded the soft ground below. She looked like a little insect in front of those enormous toes. "No, sweetie, I was lucky enough to steal this technology right before our planet was destroyed. Its creators are the Zolia and they are the most advanced civilization we have ever come across. I wouldn't be surprised if they were the ones that created the sea bombs. Even if they are extremely reserved and very hard to find. But enough about that. Are you impressed?" Larissa nodded as she found herself unable to look over her giant mom's toes. Back home, she had always thought her mother had really pretty feet and becoming gigantic had amplified that opinion. Larissa slowly stood up and began walking over to her mother's bare feet, marveling at the sheer size of them. Her hands seemed to move on their own and she touched the tips of her mother's toes, feeling their smooth texture. "Hey, are you sure? I can grow too?" Larissa was having difficulty imagining that scenario given that she currently felt like a bug compared to her mother's basketball court-sized feet. "Of course you can. You're a pure breed Ovamian and this size is actually considered a low-tier enlargement. So it shouldn't be too difficult to achieve." Ulrika smiled, watching as her daughter approached her toes and touched them just to confirm that her mom wasn't some sort of hologram. "Hee hee. Careful, little Larissa. I'm ticklish." Ulrika winked and lifted her bug-sized daughter into the air with a toe twitch. "Whoa!" Larissa yelled as she was flung into the air only for her to land on one of her mom's toenails. "Low-tier enlargement. You could crush our car with a single toe if you wanted." The teenage girl was clearly impressed by her mom's incredible power and her desire to grow was increasing with every passing moment. "Remember, I said that we can grow so huge that our home back in Bakia would be smaller than our toes. Now that's actually the most common height we use when rampaging since not much can stand up to us at that size, although we don't really have a limit. We could probably outgrow the planet if we had enough life essence." Ulrika said confidently. "Whoa. That's amazing. My. So how do I grow, Mom?" Larissa finally asked as she sat on one of her mother's pretty toes. Ulrika smiled. "Normally you would need to absorb life essence first, but I transferred a good amount into you when you were a baby, so now you just have to manipulate it. It's easy, all you have to do is imagine the height you want to reach and paint that picture clearly into your mind. Make sure it's as vivid as possible and your body will do the rest." Larissa nodded and slid off her mother's toe. "Okay. So, I'm going to focus on becoming your height." She then closed her eyes and began to imagine herself as a giant that towered over the trees just like her mom. "Concentrate on the size I want to be." She muttered to herself and peeked an eye to see if anything was happening, but she was still unfortunately the same size. "Come on. It has to be vivid. I have to desire it. I want the trees to barely reach my ankles. I want to be so huge that I can crush cars with my toes. I want to be a giant," Larissa declared, but she still felt no change and so the disappointment and sadness began to swarm over her. "Mom. I can't do it. I don't know why. I did what you said and Larissa then finally opened her eyes and realized she was no longer staring at her mom's huge feet. She was now looking directly at her mom's smiling face. You are an Ovamian." Ulrika laughed and embraced her daughter in a tight hug. They were currently the same exact height of about 300 feet tall, so it was the first time Larissa had actually been looking eye to eye with her mother instead of looking up at her. Wow. This is amazing. Larissa was awestruck as she broke away from the hug and began looking around at how small everything was now. Trees that had towered over her were now like overgrown weeds at her ankles. The soft ground felt weak under her bare soles and they sunk a few meters into the ground due to her increased weight. I love it. The teenage girl beamed and wiggled her toes playfully. I'm a giant. Yes, you are. Woo. You're my daughter, all right, hee hee. Ulrika raised her arms and cheered. Now come on, sweetie, let's go have your maiden rampage. Yes. Let's go. Larissa agreed and began following her mother as she turned towards the distant city. A city she hadn't been able to see earlier due to the trees, but was clear as day from her new height. The teenage girl giggled as the trees cracked under her soles, offering no resistance as they were trampled. You were right, Mom. The crunches feel really good under my bare feet. Ulrika smirked proudly and nodded. Just wait until you feel those little elves pop under them. It's such a surreal feeling. The two giantesses continued to march towards the city through the lush forest, leaving behind trails of massive footprints that exposed the dirt underneath the grass. The roads of civilization soon began to reveal themselves as the girls left the forest. It was a two-way road that was mainly used as a backwoods shortcut to avoid the traffic jams in the bustling city. A nearby gas station and its occupants would be the first to fall victim to the giant Ovamians. Their thunderous footsteps would have given whoever was in the area a clear warning that something was wrong, but Ulrika made a dash towards it in order to stop anyone from escaping. It was fairly deserted due to its remote location. But Ulrika's bare foot still managed to block off a pair of pickup trucks who had attempted to flee. Where do you think you're going? Ulrika taunted the petrified occupants. A quick flex of her toes and one of the trucks was flipped on its side, rendering it useless. The second truck quickly adjusted its direction and drove around Ulrika's feet, much to her amusement. Larissa, be a dear and stop them. The couple inside the truck soon began feeling strong tremors that caused their vehicle to bounce up heavily. They felt a hint of hope when they saw the distant city in their windshield with the driver preparing to put the pedal to the metal in their bid to escape. However, they soon found themselves looking at the sky. Because the truck was suddenly lifted off the ground as if gravity had been turned off. It's like a little toy. Hee hee, Larissa giggled as she twirled the truck around with her fingers. Her light touches were actually severely damaging the frame of the truck, much to the horror of the couple inside. Yes, it is. Everything is like a fragile toy to us now, and the little people inside are merely insects. Ulrika licked her lips as she returned her gaze back towards the flipped truck in front of her toes. The lone driver had been in the process of escaping through the window, but was soon covered in darkness as Ulrika hovered her right foot over his little body. You can scream now if you'd like. The blonde giantess teased right before she crushed the driver along with his truck. Yes. He was a good one. Larissa stared at her mom's beautiful feet and how just one foot had easily crushed the truck as if it were made of tinfoil. She was able to hear the man's screams right before his body was squished into a pulp under her mom's bare foot. She would feel sorry for him if it wasn't totally awesome to see her mom so powerful and happy. And dying under her mom's beautiful barefoot wasn't a bad way to go. So, how do we absorb their life essence, Mom? Ulrika's happiness continued to build the more her daughter inquired about their abilities. It happens whenever you take a life. Our bodies automatically absorb the life force from any life form that has perished by our hands. Or in this case, our feet. She chuckled. It'll be a special feeling that you'll instantly recognize as something unique. The more potent the life energy, then the more exotic it'll feel, so you'll know when you've gotten a good one. Hee hee. Are you ready to give it a try? Larissa turned to look at the truck in her fingers and watched the scared little couple shivering in fear inside. Her heartbeat began to accelerate as she imagined taking their lives by crushing them underfoot. Was she really ready to kill these helpless, puny people? She really wanted to experience the feeling. She wanted to feel the power. And she wanted to have some fun with Mom. So, she just smirked and answered, "Yes, I am." The teenage giantess then crouched down to lower the truck onto its roof before standing back up. She clearly loved her newfound power. Time to go squish little ones, she declared and placed her hands on her hips seconds before she lifted her left foot over the couple screaming inside of the truck. The The giant teenage girl slowly lowered the ball of her bare foot onto the truck and pressed down until she felt the ground underneath. A few audible pops were heard. "Oh. I feel it, Mom." Yes. I don't know what I enjoyed more. The life energy they gave me, their bodies crunching, or the feeling of their little truck crumbling under my foot. Hee hee. Larissa giggled and lifted her foot to smirk at the remains stuck inside her footprint. Yay! Good job, sweetie. There will be plenty more at the city, so let's head that way, but first. Ulrika turned her attention to the gas station near their feet and playfully jumped on top of it, completely demolishing it. There were 2 more people in there. Although from our height they're truly just insects. Speaking of height. Ulrika then began to concentrate again and her body enlarged until she was a good head taller than her daughter. There we go, now everything seems a bit more normal to me. Ha ha ha. Larissa had been laughing as her mother jumped on the gas station. But her laughter turned into a frown as her mom grew taller than her. But Mom. It was really cool for us to be the same height. Fine, 2 can play that game. She grumbled and began concentrating on growing to her mother's height, although she was only able to grow a few feet. Hey. What's going on? I barely grew that time. Don't you worry, silly goose. Ulrika teased and patted her daughter on the head. You need more life energy to grow larger. Your current height is a result of the life energy I transferred to you as a baby, so you only grew relevant to the life essence of the couple you crushed. You gotta squish more tinies to grow again. Ulrika explained, once you gain completely mastery of your powers, you'll be able to transfer life energy like I can and even drain the life essence of someone by merely touching them. Ah, pooh. Larissa pouted, but she paid close attention to what her mom explained and sighed. Well, I was never too into sports, but this is definitely something I want to get really good at. That's my girl. I'm so proud of you. Ulrika smiled happily and hugged her daughter. Now let's go hit up the town. Giant style. Both of the giant blondes giggled before turning to stroll towards the city. Their booming footsteps made resounding tremors the closer they got to the doomed city. Word of the approaching giantesses soon reached the citizens of the city, but most considered it some elaborate hoax and went about their daily lives. That all changed when the sirens began to sound. Sirens that were only heard in cases of severe natural disasters. The resounding quaking of the giantess's footsteps became even more evidence for the citizens who were still in denial. Images of Ulrika and Larissa soon popped up on screens across the city, and the initial laughter of the story soon turned to that of screams and panic. The roads became flooded with thousands of vehicles as virtually every single person in the city wanted to escape the approaching duo. However, this ended up being counterproductive as all the roads became unusable and effectively trapped the majority of the populace within the city limits. It also limited the emergency services from reaching their destinations, so no police force or medical personnel could reach the ones in need of assistance. Military forces had already been contacted by the government of the city, but they would not arrive in time to protect against the initial wave of destruction. Aw. Are you all stuck in traffic? Tis. Ulrika teased as they approached the cramped highways, much to the horror of the tinies inside the vehicles. Here. Let me see if I can clear a path. The giantess then lifted her enormous bare soul over the beginning of the highway and brought it down callously over the lanes leading out of the city. Every single vehicle and their occupants were crushed under the power of the giant blonde. I don't think this road is very friendly towards really tall people. Hee hee. I mean, it's already all mushy. Haha. And I keep in shape, so I'm the natural weight for someone my size. Hee hee. Ulrika taunted. Oh well, I don't think you little bugs are gonna be using these roads anymore, and besides, we never gave you permission to leave. Larissa laughed at her mom's antics. Ha ha ha. I see why you never had a problem with traffic jams back home. The teenage giantess strolled right next to her mother. Her feet weren't as large as her mother's, but they were still plenty big to block the part of the highway leading into the city. Not that anyone was trying to enter the doomed city. Ulrika winked, guilty as charged. Hee hee. That's why I always had to go to an emergency meeting at work whenever we would get home. The word home then suddenly resonated inside Larissa's mind. Her Ovamian blood had given her a terrifying power, but the humanity she had gained on Bakia was suddenly giving her mixed feelings. She was thinking about Relina and Allison, her best friends. Are they like insects too? The truth was that the people on this planet were like the ones back home with lives and family to protect. Lives they were mercilessly ending for their enjoyment. You okay, sweetie? Ulrika asked, snapping Larissa out of her trance. Yes, sorry, I just spaced out is all. Larissa muttered softly, not wanting to admit to her mom that she was having second thoughts about all this. Was that a space joke? Ha ha ha. You'll find that traveling through the portal tech is much easier than traveling in a high-speed spaceship, dear. But for now, walking is just perfect. Ulrika smiled and looked back down towards the citizens abandoning their vehicles and running back into the city. You walk on that side of the highway. I know there aren't many cars making a dash back into the city, but we gotta cut their escape routes and my feet are larger than yours, honey. Yes. That's fine with me, Larissa said suddenly, not wanting to crush any more people due to her sudden emergence of humanity. I'm just happy to be spending so much time with you, Mom. Ulrika smiled happily and reached down to hold her daughter's hand. I am really happy as well, Larissa. I've always dreamed of this moment and now it's become a reality. Come on, let's continue our stroll. And with that, Ulrika and Larissa began walking along the highway, rendering the only road leading out of the city completely useless. The giant mother made sure to take her time flattening everything in her path under her big feet. Men, women, and children were crushed under every single part of the blonde's bare foot. Her toes, heels, and soles were all littered with tiny red stains that used to be living beings. Their vehicles were also easily crushed and some even got stuck in between the toes of the giantess, which she quickly dislodged with a little wiggle. Larissa was trying not to pay attention to the screams of the tiny people dying under her mother's feet. The death toll must have been somewhere in the hundreds by now and would soon reach the thousands by the time they reached the first buildings. Her mom even slowed her pace to make sure no one escaped her deadly feet. The whole ordeal that had at first seemed like an amazing experience was now becoming a powerful conflict inside her. While the way the tiny lanes crunched underneath her bare soles felt fantastic, like wet sand on the beach, she wasn't sure if she would squish another person. The regret of crushing the couple earlier was swarming over her and she began to imagine the immense fear they must have felt before they died. The feeling of something crumbling under her big toe brought Larissa back from her daydream and she looked down to see that her right foot was resting on the remains of a crossroads. She again began to feel the surge of life energy flowing into her and she lifted her big toe to find that she had accidentally crushed a red car. Its crumbled remains were stuck inside the toe crater and a streetlight was sticking out from between her big and second toe. Oh wow. We reached the city sooner than I thought, Larissa muttered, realizing that she had taken another life. Yes, we did. Traveling as a giant is always the best way to travel in my opinion, but I suppose that's just me being biased. Ulrika laughed and let go of her daughter's hand as she turned to admire the trail of destruction behind them. The highway was littered with the massive footprints of the giantesses, although Ulrika's larger prints were the ones that had the higher death count as evident by the remains inside them. Alright, sweetie. Feel free to let loose. Pretend like you're in one of those kaiju movies and demolish everything in sight. Ulrika encouraged, sure mom. I'll do just that, but I just need to get used to my size. Being in the city really emphasizes how big we are, huh? I know. I'll see how long I can go without stepping on anything, Larissa chuckled nervously. Meh, we're still not at what is considered average Ovamian giant height. Ulrika informed as she wandered up to a skyscraper that still towered over them, uncaring of who or what she stepped on. She placed her palm on the structure, causing cracks to form and a bit of rubble to fall from her simple touch. Once you absorb enough life energy, we can grow big enough where this skyscraper barely reaches our chest or even our waists. Ulrika explained before turning to chuckle at her daughter's idea. I don't think you'll be able to avoid stepping on something or someone for very long, sweetie. Well. I'll give it a go and see if I can manage. Larissa commented and carefully tried to step onto a relatively empty parking lot. She tried to step down as softly as possible, but her pinky toe ended up demolishing an occupied phone booth. The unexpected crunch startled the teenage giantess and she ended misplacing her next step, flattening a set of SUVs that had collided with one another. Oops. Larissa remarked as she noticed a slim trail of red blood oozing from under the heel of her left foot and under the pinky toe of her right foot. She had already killed 7 people and she was trying to be careful. You're not very good at this game. Ha ha ha. Ulrika laughed and crouched down to peel the crushed vehicles from under her daughter's heel. The giant mother playfully tickled her daughter's feet and caused the giant giggling teenager to struggle with her balance. Wait. Mom. Ha 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 ha. You know I'm really ticklish. Stop. Please. Larissa yelped, trying to her best to maintain her stability, but it was a losing battle. She ended up lunging forward right into an office building, severely damaging its infrastructure with her wailing arms. The office building groaned for a few seconds before quickly crumbling to the ground along with the hundreds of people inside. Larissa's expression was full of guilt. That was an accident. Looks like you just lost, sweetie. Ulrika appeared behind Larissa and patted her on the back. Now, how about we play another game? How about we see who can cause the most damage instead? The giant mother suggested, wondering if her daughter had enough life energy yet to reach the average enlargement size. We can each start on one end and oh. Ulrika's attention was then drawn to flashing yellow and green lights approaching them at high speed. Seems the city's police force have finally made an appearance and they use different color lights than the ones on Bakia. Don't worry Larissa, at our current size, we are pretty resistant to most conventional weapons. Ulrika reassured her daughter who seemed to get frightened at the prospect of being shot. I'll handle them, so just hold tight and enjoy your life energy. Larissa was indeed a bit fearful of the incoming threat since she figured bullets would still penetrate her skin, but she felt a bit calmer after her mother reassured her that their current size would be enough to protect them. The teenage girl then returned her gaze back downward at the pile of rubble around her feet. Hundreds of lives had been taken from a simple misstep. A powerful wave of life energy did flow into her, but that didn't exactly appease her conscience. I am sorry. I'll try to be more careful, little ones. Just please get out of my way so I won't step on you, Larissa whispered, so her mother wouldn't hear. Her next couple of steps were taken much slower, and it effectively allowed her to move away from the tall buildings without squishing any more people, although their abandoned vehicles were still flattened under her vast soles. Larissa soon found herself in what appeared to be a quaint outdoor shopping district, and judging by the elegant designs, she realized these were all luxury boutiques, most likely designed for the very rich. Her curiosity got the best of her and she crouched down to rip the roof off one of the nearby shops. As she did so, she heard a scream come from inside the shop and a terrified brunette ran out of the shop in a panic. Larissa stared at the tiny woman as she ran past her enormous toes and into the nearby parking lot. Something inside the teenage girl switched on as she realized the brunette sparked an incredible resemblance to Gianna, her school bully and rival. The tiny brunette ran directly to a sporty red car and attempted to open it. But in her fear, she kept dropping her keys on the ground. Not only did the tiny brunette look very similar to Gianna, but she also possessed a car that was the same color and style. A wide smirk suddenly formed around the giant teenager and she licked her lips as she stood back up. What's wrong, Gianna? Having car issues? Larissa taunted as she approached the brunette, causing the tiny car to bounce heavily as she trapped it between her colossal bare feet. The tiny woman began to tremble as she looked up at the looming giant blonde. I'm not who you speak of. And my name is Alamai. She whimpered. I don't care what your name is. Larissa said sternly. Her remorse had completely disappeared the moment her hate took over. Your name is now Gianna. You are a classmate of mine. A classmate who has tormented me for years and stole my sweet crush from me. She growled and balled up her fist. So now. You're going to suffer my wrath. I'm going to crush you. The teenage giantess then lifted up her right foot and brought it down on the brunette's car, completely flattening it while also sending the tiny woman flying into the tarmac. You think you're such a big shot? With your fancy car? Well, how big do you feel right now? Hubbub. The brunette slowly got to her feet, her body now covered in dirt and cuts. Please. Please, I beg you. Don't crush me. I don't know who you're talking about. But I'm sorry for. You're sorry. No, you're not Gianna. Not yet. Larissa grinned as she slid her enormous foot towards the trembling woman. Kiss my toes and beg for your miserable life. Larissa commanded, her hate had truly taken over. Ameans didn't need to be told twice and she instantly ran up to the enormous boulders of flesh. She didn't understand who the enormous blonde was confusing her with, but she wasn't about to argue with a giantess who had toes larger than vehicles. She tried to kiss all of the toes as best she could, but soon resorted to just massaging them in hopes that it would be enough to satisfy the behemoth. Larissa crossed her arms and smirked as she watched the tiny brunette humiliate herself as she groveled for her life. She knew this wasn't truly Gianna, but it was close enough. Her newfound abilities would allow her to take matters into her own hands now. Her mind already began fantasizing about what she would do to the real Gianna once she got back home, and the power she now possessed was intoxicating. You think you can torment me for years and get away with it, Gianna? You're dead wrong. I'm a towering titan who can do anything she wants, and you're just a pathetic little insect. The teenage giantess then lifted her right foot upwards, trapping Ameans in between two of her toes. She playfully wiggled them around, much to the horror of the screaming brunette. That's right, Gianna. Scream for me. She gloated while Ameans screamed at the top of her lungs. Now. Squish for me. Larissa said coldly and clenched her toes tightly, turning Ameans into mush. The blonde then ran her foot along the many luxurious shops, further destroying the body in between her toes while also demolishing the whole shopping district. Once she was finished, Larissa felt incredibly empowered, finally taking in the incredible power that came while being humongous. The hate she had for Gianna had temporarily shifted her mindset, and the citizens of the city would pay the price. Run for your lives, little ants. She chuckled and began walking back towards her mother, uncaring of what was being crushed under her bare feet. Meanwhile, in a nearby section of the city. You are under arrest. If you do not cooperate, then we will open fire. The police captain warned as his entire squadron aimed their pistols at the giantess currently looming over them. There were about 40 of them, but they all felt incredibly small in the shadow of the colossal woman despite having the numerical advantage. The giant woman couldn't help but laugh at the tiny police force. Really? You think you're honestly going to arrest me and my daughter? Look at us. Can we even fit in any of your little jails? Humph. Pathetic. Let me show you what happens to little insects who don't understand their place. Ulrika arrogantly crossed her arms and began to focus on growing herself. The police captain could only look on in fear as the already enormous woman grew even more gigantic right before their very eyes. Her growing feet pushed abandoned vehicles along the tarmac until they got stuck and became scrap metal under her soles. All without Ulrika moving an inch, her growing form was soon seen across most of the city, with most skyscrapers now barely reaching her waist. Only a handful reached her chest and even fewer were taller than her now. She had reached her favorite height of 660 foot tall. The entire police squadron were left in absolute horror at the sheer size of the giantess. Her toes were now each larger than 3-story homes, and their playful wiggling felt like a powerful earthquake. Open fire. The police captain ordered, and a frenzy of bullets were unleashed on Ulrika. Do you all seriously think your puny weapons can do anything to me? Ulrika shook her head as she watched the puny ant-sized cops trying their best to retaliate against her. You all should have gotten on your knees and pleaded for your worthless lives instead of doing such foolish actions. See for yourself how futile your efforts are. She smirked and hovered her enormous bare foot over the entirety of the squadron and their cruisers. The bullets were harmlessly bouncing off the skin of the giant woman, and half of the squadron broke away in an attempt to escape. However, Ulrika's foot was now large enough to cover an entire city block, so there was no real hope of escape for the doomed officers. Die! Ulrika declared as she lowered her foot until she felt the ground sink underneath. All 40 of the officers were crushed instantly, along with a few civilians hiding nearby. Mom! Larissa exclaimed as she appeared on the scene, marveling at how enormous her mom had become. She was like toddler to her mother now that she had more than doubled her previous height. You're huge. Have you already crushed that many people? Ulrika giggled and crouched down to pat her daughter on the head like she used to do when she was toddler. Hey sweetie, I took care of our little cop problem. To answer your question, I've been demolishing cities for decades, and so I have a large amount of life energy saved up. I'm confident you can reach an adequate size yourself. A few more buildings should do it. She winked. Larissa, who was currently driven by her hate, was quick to nod and smirk at her mother's suggestion. She turned to look at the surrounding office buildings and stared at the panicking faces inside of them. The people screamed as Larissa approached each building one by one before casually pushing them over with the palm of her hand as if they were 6-foot-tall Jenga block towers. The amount of life energy that the giant teenager absorbed was more than enough to reach a size her mother considered to be the standard Ovamian size. She focused on the size she wanted just as she had done before, and her body reacted to her desires. Larissa soon began to loom over most of the skyscrapers, much like her mother, although her growth stopped at 575 foot tall, so she was still a head shorter than her mom. Wow! This is amazing, Larissa said happily. Yes, it is. Ulrika beamed and embraced her daughter in a tight hug. I'm so happy you are finally able to show off your true Ovamian height, Larissa. I love you so much, sweetie. Larissa's smile grew even wider as she hugged her mother back. This was the quality bonding she missed so much, and she loved making her mother happy. I love you too, Mom. Down below, a row of small buildings had been demolished by the giant ladies who couldn't have cared less as piles of rubble formed underneath their massive bare sawls. Now, like I was saying, let's see who can cause the most damage. Hee hee. Ulrika suggested, to which Larissa giggled and nodded. Both giant women then began to systematically step on dozens of the now ankle-tall shops and supermarkets, easily crumbling them underneath their powerful feet. The citizens ran as fast as they could, but to the giantesses, they were like slow-moving ants. Ulrika was in a state of glee as she squished dozens of the tinies under each footstep, with Larissa also crushing her fair share of the people under her bare feet. The entire city was in a state of chaos as the demolished roads meant that they all had virtually no escape and were now just scrambling to escape the deadly feet of the giantesses. The landscape of a peaceful metropolis had now changed to that of a war zone filled with hundreds of the giant women's footprints. Footprints that were filled with rubble, crushed vehicles, and tiny red dots that used to be living beings. Fires had also begun from some of the fallen structures, and the whole scene resembled something out of a major natural disaster movie. Looks like I'm winning, Mom. Larissa laughed as she had begun kicking the base out of skyscrapers that were still taller than her, resulting in high levels of death and destruction. Oh yeah? We'll see about that. Ulrika chuckled and began pushing every skyscraper she could find. The ones that were chest height and taller were pushed over by her palm, while anything smaller was kicked apart like a sandcastle. By this point, over half of the city's population had met their end under the bare sawls of the giant woman, between their playful, powerful fingers, or under tons of rubble. Oh sweetie. Hold on. I found a little ant pile. Ulrika smirked as reached what looked like a park filled with hundreds of tiny people. You all were smart to move away from your little toy scrapers. But did you seriously think you could hide here and avoid us completely? Some of the people in the park screamed and began making a run for it, but they were quickly crushed by the big toe of the giantess, covering her large digit in dozens of red dots. Anyone who tries to leave will be crushed. Understand? Ulrika informed the trembling citizens who now stood frozen in place. Good. How about a foot massage, Larissa? I'd love one. Larissa remarked as she approached the park. A trail of destruction could be clearly seen behind her. Both giant women sat down and placed their towering saws over the cowering citizens. They didn't exactly know where to begin and they all stared at each other for support. Ulrika's index finger coming down on a small group of them was all the encouragement they needed, and they soon began massaging the massive feet of the giant woman as best they could. Don't stop until we tell you to. Anyone who tries to leave will be squashed. Ulrika warned. Larissa again found herself staring at her mother's huge, yet pretty feet. They were covered in dust and a few pieces of rubble could be seen in between her toes, but they were still quite a sight to see. The teenage giantess blushed as her mother caught her staring at her feet. But Ulrika just smiled. Would you like to take a picture of our feet, Larissa? She suggested, secretly knowing her daughter had a thing for feet, but not wanting to make her feel bad about it. Why, yes. That would be a nice picture. Larissa nodded and reached into her pocket to retrieve her phone. She then quickly began taking snap after snap of their enormous feet, with the tiny trees barely reaching a third up their bare soles. The teenage giantess then began taking a video of her mother's foot, with her zooming in at the puny tinies below along with the surrounding landscape to further showcase its sheer size. Ulrika wiggled her toes to dislodge some of the rubble, much to the horror of the tinies below. Both ladies then began to chat happily as they enjoyed their massages. Ulrika told her daughter about their home world while Larissa told her mom about her situation at school. It was quite a wonderful conversation, but it was soon ended by the sound of beeping coming from Ulrika's bracelet. Looks like the army is here. Ulrika informed her daughter as a hologram displaying incoming aircraft and ground units. Army? Mom, can we really handle them? I know we're huge, but maybe we should leave now, and Larissa's worries were quickly shushed by her mother. Relax, sweetie. The army is always the buzzkill that ends my rampages, but they're hardly ever a problem. Ulrika smiled and stood up, crushing the tinies, massaging her feet as she did so. Do you want to know why Ovamians were so feared across hundreds of worlds? Do you think we would have been such a terror if we could be taken out so easily? The truth is, as long as we intake the necessary life energy, we can reach unfathomable sizes. The giant mother then began to grow again, although at a much faster rate of speed. Larissa could only look up and stare as her mother's stature increased beyond anything she could have imagined. At one point, Ulrika adjusted her position so that Larissa was between her growing feet, efficiently protecting her daughter. Ulrika's growing feet soon began knocking over office buildings that earlier challenged them in height. They were falling over like Lego blocks. Anything else caught in the path of the expanding feet was crushed into dust. Her head soon made it to the clouds, and the city now looked more like a large rug. Ulrika winked and waved at her daughter, who seemed dumbfounded. The giant mother then turned to look at the incoming jets before easily dispatching them with a clap of her hands. Hundreds of soldiers were crushed in an instant. The surviving jets were unable to deal with the wind created from the clap and as a result, crashed to the ground. The helicopters were easily taken care of by Ulrika blowing wind in their direction. Less than flies. Ulrika smirked as the pilots lost control and crashed into the ground. She then looked down at the tanks on the outskirts of the city. They were firing absolutely everything at her, but nothing was working. Missiles, anti-tank artillery, and cannon shells were all having no effect on the mega giantess. She dragged her big toe around the entire fleet of tanks, trapping them inside a deep canyon. The soldiers couldn't believe the power of this colossal being. Ulrika stood with her hands on her hips as she watched the ground forces see for themselves how futile their weapons and efforts were. After a few minutes, she finally decided to hover her left foot them. A foot so massive that it covered the entire army in a cold, dark shadow. Know your place, Specs. Ulrika smirked and easily crushed the tanks under her bare soles, caving the surrounding area in as it had just been hit by an earthquake. The Ovamian giantess then twisted her foot left and right onto the remnants of the army before making her way back to her daughter. See, sweetie? Nothing to worry about. It's like I told you. Ovamians are supreme beings. Everyone else are just insects and specks to us. I suppose you can only imagine how many I have crushed to reach this height. Hee hee. But that's a story for another day. How about I finish off this city and we can head home? Ulrika suggested, to which Larissa nodded. Sure. But do you mind if I ride on top of your feet? You just be careful. Larissa asked as she balanced herself on a nearby skyscraper, her mother's booming steps making it hard to remain standing. I don't know. I could just step on you instead. Ulrika giggled and hovered her right barefoot right over her daughter, getting so close that her daughter could touch the bottom of her sole while also demolishing part of the skyscraper she was holding onto. Larissa laughed as her mother teased her. She knew that her mother loved her very much and would never actually step on her. The feeling was mutual, although it was hard for Larissa to imagine being larger than her mother anytime soon. Very funny, Mom. She yelled. Ulrika laughed and removed her foot from above Larissa before setting it down directly in front of her, crushing any of the structures underneath into dust and rubble. Jump on, sweetie, I'll be slow, but hold on tight, okay? Of course. I'll be careful. Larissa smiled and climbed onto her mother's foot before giving her the thumbs up. Ulrika then began to crush the rest of the city under her humongous feet, wiping out many blocks under a single footstep and leaving almost no survivors. It seemed the only pieces of the city that had any chance of survivors would be the areas in between her toes. Larissa was really enjoying the ride and appreciated her mother being slow and careful with her. It was her plan all along so that she could take videos of her mother's huge pretty feet from a fantastic angle. She caught everything in high definition and even managed to take plenty of pictures of the destruction. Ulrika spotted her daughter's antics, but said nothing about it, pretending not to notice. She wanted her daughter to be happy and loved that she thought her feet were pretty. She even made an effort to crush certain sections of the city as slow as possible and even lifted her other foot on her toes so Larissa could see her massive rubble-covered sole. After a few minutes, the city was now eerily silent with only 200 or 300 survivors possibly hiding in the half-crushed structures. Ulrika wiggled her toes in satisfaction and began to shrink down to her standard 660-foot height. Larissa quickly put her phone away once she realized her mother was dwindling in size and jumped off of her bare feet once she got the chance. So did you have fun? Ulrika asked as she hugged her daughter and kissed her on the forehead. Yes, I did. Today was amazing. This has changed my life. Larissa said happily. It's gonna be hard to resist growing back home when we get into a traffic jam. Haha. Larissa laughed only to stop suddenly as the word home resounded in her conscience. Her earlier state of hate was gone and she was now feeling a great deal of remorse over all the lives she had ended. It would be something that would weigh on her for a few days since Bakia had given her something her mother never had. Humanity, ha 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 ha. Yeah. Trust me. It takes a lot of willpower, but it's important we don't grow back in Bakia. We want to keep the league off our trail. So, you gotta remember not to grow in public. I'll explain more back home. Now come on, let's shrink down before any more military forces show up. I love creating a sense of mystery when we suddenly disappear. Ulrika laughed and then began to shrink back down alongside her daughter. Ulrika then opened up the familiar purple portal and stepped through it without a second look behind her. Larissa, however, looked back at all the destruction and closed her eyes. She wondered what the future held for her and what kind of antics would her mother request of her. With a deep sigh, she stepped through the portal and returned to Bakia. She was indeed an Ovamian, but she also had a conscience and only time would tell if they could mix. The end. This story was written by Tom Martz. Link in the description below. Ulrika and Larissa are original characters of Cormany Media and are antagonists to Lix and Ryung. Check our DeviantArt gallery and character list for more information. If you would like to support us and help us to create more, please consider to support us on Patreon or DeviantArt as subscribers. Thank you.